Unsheathed, The Story of Muhammad by Tara MacArthur.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
This is the story of Muhammad, the founder of Islam. This audiobook is based on the original paper and ink version of Unsheathed, but it shortens and simplifies the story. I didn't clutter this audio edition by citing sources. If you have time to check references, you can look them up in the paper book, where all the references are given in detail. Chapter 1. An Arab Orphan. When Muhammad was born, nobody guessed that he was destined to change the world. The time was April 571. The place was Mecca, an unimportant little trading post high in the desert mountains of western Arabia. His tribe was the Quraysh, who were the dominant tribe of Mecca, but his parents were of no importance within the tribe. Muhammad had a difficult childhood. His father died before he was born. His mother had no money. According to custom, she sent her newborn to be fostered in the desert. So the baby Muhammad lived in a nomad's tent in the wilderness, where his foster parents herded camels and goats. Fostering was usually for 2 years, but his foster mother was not ready to give him up, and his real mother was in no hurry to have him back. So they agreed to extend the time. Muhammad and his foster brother used to play in the goats' pasture land. When they were 4 years old, Muhammad suffered a seizure and was hurled to the ground. His foster brother ran for help, yelling that Muhammad had been murdered, and their parents arrived to find him pale and rigid. Although he recovered, his superstitious foster mother feared that he was demon-possessed. For the next year, she was careful to keep Muhammad within sight close to her tent. The once loving foster family became more and more frightened of caring for him. When he was 5, they gave up and returned him to Mecca. In Mecca, Muhammad lived in his grandfather's house among a bewildering crowd of extended family. His mother was also in the household, but she delegated the daily tasks of caring for him to a child slave. Muhammad had little time to bond with his mother, for she died when he was 6. Muhammad's grandfather owned the Zamzam well. Because it was just outside the city temple, he had persuaded everyone that its water was holy. The old man used to sit on a mat beside the bubbling water, distributing it to eager customers. His own children had too much respect to touch the mat, but Muhammad dared to sit on top of it and sometimes even push the old man right off. When Muhammad was 8, his grandfather died. His life changed again as he was claimed by a grown-up uncle, the serious and responsible Abdul-Muttalib. At last Muhammad had a stable home, for Abdul-Muttalib took care of him for the rest of his childhood. The main problem in their household was poverty. Abdul-Muttalib owned a small herd of camels, which saved the family from starvation, but he was bad at business, and there was never any money for extras. Abdul-Muttalib tried to enter the merchant class, for all Mecca's most successful citizens were merchants. This was because the town was hot and dry. Often there was no rain for years at a time. Since no food could be grown there, the people were completely dependent on imported food brought from Central Arabia. The town usually had enough grass to feed cattle, and most middle-rank Meccans were tanners. The merchants loaded the leather onto long camel caravans to sell at foreign bazaars. When Muhammad was 12, Abu-Talib took him with the caravan to Syria. Muhammad made himself useful by guarding the baggage. They met people who spoke strange languages and believed strange religions. At Basra Bazaar, Muhammad watched the buying and selling, perhaps already noting his uncle's mistakes. Then they reloaded their camels with grain, oil, wine, weapons, cotton, and linen to resell at a profit in Mecca. This expedition did not restore Abu-Talib's fortune, and he remained a poor man. Muhammad had to look for a job. He had no money of his own and no rich friends, so he had no chance to prove himself in business. There was nobody to teach him tanning or metalsmithing. He was not educated. Like most other people in Mecca, he could not even read. He had to accept the humblest work available. For several years he worked as a goatherd. Unfortunately, he was only paid in tamarind seeds. Watching goats was boring, and Muhammad found ways to amuse himself on the job. He and his friends played games with stones. He picked berries of mustard bushes, and he learned the hard way that it was better to eat only those that had already ripened to black. He loved camel races, and since camels came under his care, he probably found a way to set them to the racetrack. Perhaps because of boredom, Muhammad developed some obsessive habits. He disliked even numbers. He wiped himself in the toilet with 3 or 5 or 7 pebbles, but never 4 or 6. He liked to wash the right side of his body before the left. He combed his hair from the right side first, and he lay down to sleep on his right side. His right sandal was always the first he put on, and the left was the first that he removed. He was particular about washing between his toes and inside his ears. He cleaned his teeth 4 or 5 times a day. Whenever he entered the house, he would reach for his toothbrush, which was a twig of mustard bush. Another aspect of this obsessiveness was his scrupulous honesty. He performed his duties exactly and never touched what did not belong to him. He earned a reputation for being truthful and trustworthy, and was well liked in the community. The Meccans were polytheists. They worshipped multiple gods at once. Their temple, the Kaaba, housed 360 idols. Al-Lat, Al-Uzza, Buwana, Dhul Kaffain, Dhul Samawi, Fals, Hubal, Khalasa, Manaf, Manat, Nasr, Shams, Suwa', Wad, Yaghuth, Ya'uq, and the list went on. The Meccans, including Muhammad, prayed to these idols for health, wealth, love, or curses on their enemies, paid the priests to cast divining arrows that would reveal truths or guide their actions, then made a ritual walk in a leftward circle around their building. The Kaaba was famous. Pilgrims from all over Arabia came to worship there all the time, but especially for the great pilgrimage ceremony in the 12th month. Dressed in plain white sheets that exposed the right shoulder, the pilgrims ran back and forth between 2 hills, threw stones at a pillar that represented the demons, circled the Kaaba, and slaughtered an animal sacrifice. After these religious rituals, the visitors spent their money at the city bazaar, which created a tourist industry for Mecca. The Meccans made no distinction between politics and religion. Whoever controlled the Kaaba temple controlled the whole city. The city was ruled by a council of elders who decided everything in the town hall, opposite the Kaaba. These elders were all males, over 40, and all high-ranking members of the Quraysh tribe. Muhammad's family was not important within the tribe, and he was not important within his family. He knew that he might never become an elder or anything else better than a goatherd. A war broke out when Muhammad was 18, and he said that he never regretted fighting in it. However, this conflict went down in history as the Unholy War. The Quraysh were only fighting because of an old promise to help their allies, and their allies only needed help because one of them had committed a murder on a sacred ceasefire day. Naturally, the victim's tribe wanted revenge. There was only one day of fighting that year. Muhammad's job was to pick up enemy arrows from the ground and hand them to his uncles to reshoot. The battle was a draw, so they fought again the next year. That battle was also a draw, so the next year the enemy tribes met for a third clash. This time, Muhammad was one of the archers. The Quraysh tribe promised each other never to retreat, and by noon they could claim a decisive victory. One enemy sub-tribe still could not accept defeat, so in the fourth year there was a fourth day of fighting. This time the Quraysh victory was final. Even before this fourth round of the unholy war, the Quraysh were discussing the nature of justice. They could not help knowing that they were fighting in a bad cause. Some of them concluded that supporting justice was more important than being loyal to the tribe. This revolutionary idea inspired Muhammad. The rebels, including Muhammad, swore a solemn oath. As long as the sea is wet and the mountains stand, we shall act together against crime. No matter whether the victim is a Meccan or a stranger, as long as we live, we shall side with him against the criminal until justice is restored. This oath was called the extra contract because it bound its members to act beyond the call of duty. At first, the extra contract was effective. A Quraysh elder cheated a foreign merchant. The members of the contract marched in a block to the elder's house, seized the goods, and restored them to their owner. Soon afterwards, a tourist's daughter was kidnapped. The contract members surrounded the kidnapper's house until he brought the girl out still a virgin, and they restored her to her father. Unfortunately, nothing else was heard of the extra contract. The good intentions soon faded away. Muhammad was now grown up, but he was still only a goat herd. He was slim and fair-skinned, with a long hooked nose, dark eyes, and a thick beard. Abu-Talib's daughter, Fakhita, said that he had the best smile in the world. Muhammad smiled at Fakhita often, for he fell in love with her. Since an Arab had the first right to wed his father's brother's daughter, he was confident when he asked Abu-Talib for Fakhita's hand in marriage. It was a surprise when his father's brother did not agree immediately. It turned out that Muhammad was not the only family member who could ignore tribal customs. The next he knew, Fakhita had been married off to a rich merchant. When Muhammad complained to his uncle, Abu-Talib responded, "Nephew, a nobleman rewards a nobleman." He was too poor to risk giving Fakhita away to a penniless goat herd like Muhammad. Muhammad needed to earn some real money, not just tamarind seeds. When he was 24, he heard about a job opportunity. The richest merchant in Mecca was looking for a new agent to drive her camels to Syria. Abu-Talib promptly presented himself to the merchant and recommended Muhammad for the job. She agreed to hire him for 2 camels. To Muhammad's embarrassment, Abu-Talib persuaded her to make it 4. Muhammad probably took a variety of merchandise to Syria: cattle hides, leather goods, sheepskins, woolen cloth, clarified butter, dried raisins, musk, and silverwork. After 2 months, he returned to Mecca with a cargo of Syrian products for his employer to sell at Mecca Bazaar. She found that the profits were nearly double what she had expected. She was so pleased with Muhammad's competence that she again doubled his commission. He took home 8 camels. A few days later, the same merchant sent Muhammad on a second business trip, this time to Tihama in Yemen. Since not many merchants wanted to battle through the heat of Yemen in summer, Muhammad could bring back a monopoly. 6 weeks later he arrived home in Mecca with camel loads of frankincense, myrrh, laudanum, ebony, ivory, and fine striped weavings. As there were no competing goods at Mecca Bazaar, his products once again fetched a high price. His employer realized that her business would benefit if she secured his services permanently. She decided to marry him.